Cheese. It's on our pizza, it's in our sandwiches. Let's be honest, it's pretty much a food group for a lot of us. But what if I told you that some of the most popular cheeses out there might actually be working against your health? Well, today we're going to break down 4 types of cheese you might want to think twice about. And trust me, some of these might surprise you. So let me ask you this directly. Could your go-to cheese be messing with your blood pressure and cholesterol? It's a really important question, especially if you're keeping an eye on your heart health. See, cheese can be a fantastic source of protein and calcium, but some kinds are just packed with sodium and unhealthy fats. We're about to get specific, so let's see if your favorite makes the list. Here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get into the main reason any cheese can be a bit of a risk. Then we'll dive into the processed, creamy, aged, and smoked varieties. And don't worry, we'll wrap it all up by looking at some much healthier choices you can start making right away. So let's get to it. So, what's the deal with cheese, really? How can one kind be perfectly fine while another is a potential problem? Well, it all comes down to one single fundamental idea, and it has everything to do with how cheese is made. It all boils down to one word: concentration. Just think about it. To make one little block of cheese, you need a ton of milk. The whole process is designed to remove the water, which means everything else, all the good stuff and the bad stuff, gets packed down into this much smaller, denser package. And this, right here, is the double-edged sword of cheese. That concentration gives us this amazing protein and calcium-packed food. But at the exact same time, it super concentrates the sodium and the saturated fat. This is why a serving of cheese that looks tiny can actually blow your entire daily sodium limit right out of the water. Okay, so keeping that idea of concentration in mind, let's look at our first 2 culprits. These are probably some of the most common types of cheese you'll find in any grocery store, but they can be some of the biggest health traps out there. First on our list are the creamy cheeses. You know what I'm talking about. The cream cheese you smear on your bagel, those super soft spreadable cheeses in tubs, and yeah, even those cheese in a tube products that are just so easy to grab. So you gotta ask, how do they get that creamy? Well, it's often from a lot of added fats, and sometimes even hydrogenated fats, which are a source of trans fat. They're also loaded with sodium and emulsifiers to keep that texture perfectly smooth. Some even use starch as a filler to bulk them up. This is especially true for those squeezy cheese spreads that, let's be honest, barely qualify as food, let alone cheese. All right, next up is a staple in so many refrigerators, that perfect, square, individually wrapped slice of cheese. It is the absolute king of convenience for a quick burger or a grilled cheese sandwich, but of course, there's a catch. Yeah, our source material doesn't pull any punches here. It says it's not really cheese, it's basically fat. That perfect gooey melt you get isn't some kind of magic. It's because these slices have very little to do with what we think of as actual cheese. So, what are they really made of? Well, they're usually a concoction of vegetable fat and milk powder, all held together with a bunch of additives. We're talking about things like phosphates to get the texture right and nitrates for preservation. And in large amounts, these can contribute to inflammation and put extra strain on your kidneys and liver. Of all the cheeses we're talking about today, these processed slices are probably the one category you should seriously consider cutting out completely. Okay, let's shift gears from the obviously processed stuff to something a bit more traditional. These next 2 types are often seen as gourmet cheeses. They pack an incredible flavor punch, but that flavor can come with a hidden health cost. We're talking about the titans of the cheese world here, those intensely flavorful aged cheeses like Parmesan, Gorgonzola, and Roquefort. That amazing, powerful taste comes right back to that principle of concentration. They've had even more water removed, and they're aged over time, which basically turns the flavor and everything else up to 11. So just how much sodium are we really talking about? Well, get this. In a tiny 30-gram serving, that's about the size of 2 dice, you can find a whopping 500 milligrams of sodium. For a lot of people, that's a third of their recommended daily intake in one tiny bite. And because they're so concentrated, they aren't just dense in sodium. They're also packed with calories and saturated fat. If you eat them every day, they can raise your bad cholesterol and even contribute to the hardening of your arteries. So what's the bottom line? Think of them like a powerful spice. A little sprinkle on your pasta? Awesome. A giant chunk on a cracker every single day? Probably not the best idea. Our fourth and final cheese to keep an eye on is any type that's been smoked. A classic example is smoked provolone. But here, the risk isn't just coming from the cheese itself, but from the actual smoking process. Now, this is really interesting because the main risk here isn't just the fat and the salt. The smoking process itself can create something called hydrocarbon compounds. When you eat these frequently, it can increase what's known as oxidative stress in your body and even damage the delicate lining of your blood vessels. And of course, all of that is on top of the fact that they're usually pretty high in sodium and saturated fat to begin with. Okay, I know that was a lot of don't eat this, but here's the good news. The takeaway is not that you have to give up cheese entirely. Not at all. The key is just to make smarter choices. So let's look at some fantastic, healthier alternatives you can enjoy. Really, the best swaps are fresh cheeses, the ones with a higher water content, basically the opposite of all that super concentrated stuff we've been talking about. Think of high-protein options like ricotta and cottage cheese. Fresh mozzarella is another wonderful choice. Because they're less concentrated, you get that great protein and calcium with way less sodium and fat. So, it all just comes down to a few mindful habits. First, choose fresh cheeses over processed ones whenever you can. Second, keep an eye on your portion sizes, especially with those powerful aged cheeses. And hey, maybe even try making your own at home. It's actually easier than you'd think, and it gives you total control over the ingredients. But above all else, become a label reader. It is the single best tool you've got. So you see, it's not about being afraid of cheese. It's just about understanding it. By remembering that one core idea, concentration, you can walk down the cheese aisle with total confidence. The next time you're shopping, you'll have the power to pick the flavors you love without the health risks. So which one are you going to choose?